Hi there guys, and welcome to this tutorial on how to get an A star on Of Mice and Men. This is focusing on the English Lit exam, the Unit 1 exam. Okay, so I'm sure, know the basics about this exam. It is in two parts. You've got your section A, whether that's Lord of the Flies or whatever other text you're doing, and Of Mice and Men will fall into section B of the exam. And within that section, your Of Mice and Men question is going to have two parts to it. The first part is an analysis of an extract. This is unseen, so you can't go in with a prepared or sort of practiced response to this. Part B is going to be a question that focuses on the rest of the text, and therefore you can do some good revision in terms of your contextual understanding of the whole novel, and also plenty of preparation and revision on key themes, key characters, key relationships and plot points. Okay, so for section B of this exam is 45 minutes in total, which means that for each part of your Of Mice and Men section, you've only got 22.5 minutes, and it's really important that you keep a really close eye on this. The temptation is to kind of get stuck into part A and time runs away with you. But, you know, the two are equally important, and therefore, you know, time management is really quite important. 30 marks, they're available, just the same amount of marks as is available for Section A. And remembering that it is hugely important to keep a focus on contextual features in your Of Mice and Men response. Okay, so we're focusing on really pushing ourselves to get an A star. What's going to be required of you? What are the examiners really looking for? Well, they use this interesting phrase here, methods. And that can sometimes seem a bit confusing. What do we mean by methods? It's quite simple. It's the techniques that a writer has used. So you can think about, well, what do we mean in a novel about techniques? Well, it can mean anything from use of character, use of plot, use of setting. It can also incorporate things like dialogue, and also things like the structure of it, you know, where things happen. So, you know, just as an example of something structural, the cyclical structure of this novel, you know, it begins and ends in the brush, doesn't it? That's a method, that's one of Steinbeck's techniques. And keeping at the heart of your writing the idea of Steinbeck's purpose. Why is he doing things? And the more interpretive and original you can be with those ideas, the better. Plenty of marks available for original interpretations. I think it's helpful, you know, particularly when we're looking to get an A star on your Of Mice and Men question, to try to be objective in terms of your analysis. Plenty of students will go in with I think, I feel, I believe, but it can sound a bit more sophisticated and a bit more mature to use slightly more objective phrasing, such as it could be considered, or potentially this creates. It shows that you're being analytical rather than just giving a personal response to the text. The examiners are very keen to see, as I was mentioning just then, original and imaginative interpretations. They're not interested in you regurgitating what your teacher's told you, about just spewing back up onto the page some interesting thing your teacher's told you about George and Lenny. You've got to think for yourself. You can get a really top grade, you can get a B or an A by remembering and revising what you've been told, but you're not going to get an A star unless you bring something new to the party, something that you personally have come up with, your own interpretations, your take on the text. They want to see a really secure knowledge of the text and understanding, and you can achieve that by frequent quotations, embedded responses. So it's about using some nice short quotation. So rather than, you know, sticking in a huge 3 or 4 line quote, single words or couple of words, you know, thinking about how you could incorporate crazy bastard rather than finding the full quote from George in chapter 1. Okay, what else are we thinking about here then, A-star? Right, evaluative language, evaluating language, form and structure. It's not just thinking about a technique in isolation, like here's a simile, here's a metaphor, but also recognising that these are part of a much bigger picture. So this key word here, evaluate, it's one of the most important. If you're not really fully clear on evaluation, it means that you're weighing things up and making judgments. And I think it's quite important to also point out that we're looking at language, form and structure, not just language. So evaluation, a really, really crucial skill. Okay, now I must just apologise for the screen going stripy here. Don't quite know what's happened. Here are my tips for how to go about structuring a response to kind of the two sections of your Of Mice and Men question. Now, you've obviously got, section A is, as we've mentioned, the extract. So you're given an extract from the text, and you're expected to focus your close analysis on that extract. So avoid the temptation about bringing in huge amounts of content from elsewhere in the text. What they're looking for is a close analysis of this extract, and with that obviously would come evaluating effects on the reader, but again within this extract. They'd also want you to be focusing on really addressing Steinbeck's purpose and looking at different techniques he's used, showing that you understand a range of Steinbeck's purposes and literary techniques. They're looking for interpretation, as I mentioned on the previous slide, and I've just kind of pluralised this because I think it's important to, if we're focusing on an A-star, that there isn't just one prescribed meaning. The best students will look at alternative interpretations as well. And as mentioned, short embedded quotations, really important because you're looking at a small extract. If you're just going to write out half of that extract, you're wasting valuable time, and also you're not showing high enough level of analytical skill because you're not honing in on specific language features. Okay, so for the section B, that is a more general, often sort of contextual style question that will refer to the rest of the novel, I would advise my students to focus on no more than 3 or 4 different areas. This is a practical thing, really. Just remember, 22.5 minutes. How many points can you realistically make? And if you're going to be doing any more than 3 or 4, you're not doing them in sufficient enough depth. So don't try and show the examiner you know everything about this novel. Show them that you can interpret and evaluate a few very key points. Avoid repeating yourself. So, avoid making the very same points as you have done in the extract in section A, part A. We're thinking about analysis and evaluation of effects. We're focusing once more on Steinbeck's purpose. And this, which is so important, relevant contextual issues. So that could be anything, it could be attitudes towards disability, towards women, the lives of migrant workers, the racism, and that will be really dependent on what your question is asking you. Just here, a copy of Mark Band 6 from the examiner's mark scheme. Just useful for you to have a look at the examiner speak. If you want to pause this and have a look at it for yourself, that's absolutely fine. I would just want to very briefly draw your attention, because obviously this is going to be a star, to close analysis, interpretation, evaluation, elements of context, and also, in terms of A star, fluency and focus, high degrees of accuracy. Okay, pause this at this point if you want to have a closer look. But what I've done here is try to sum up 4 of those very key skills, and try and explain to you what that means in a more student-friendly language, really. So you see you've got skills of insight. Well, the examiners say that A-star students will have insightful exploratory responses, and what they really mean by that is that you can read deeply into a text and that you can show them an understanding not just of the novel but of the question you've been given, and that you've maintained good focus on that. This 4th column along is one that I would just ask students to have a think about whether they can achieve that skill. Can you do it? How do you know that you can do it? So possibly as I'm just talking through these, have a think about those questions. Are you able to really show an examiner that you can incorporate that skill into an answer? Second, very, very important skill of analysis, and the examiners talk about close analysis of detail. And I would say that that's really, in terms of A-star, it's about small, relevant quotes, and I haven't put it on here, but maybe worth adding that they're embedded within a longer point. Evaluation. Probably, evaluation is one of these things that really can be a barrier to students achieving an A-star. And what the examiners talk about is evaluation of a writer's use of language and or structure and or form and effects. Well, what are we talking about? We're talking about evaluating, weighing up, and making judgments about purpose, effects, using weighing up words such as significant, importance, whether something's critical to the plot. And the 4th skill I'm going to focus on is interpretation. They want to see convincing, imaginative interpretations, and that's really just summed up as your take on things, being original. Okay, so we've got here an extract from a past exam paper. I believe it's summer 2012, and it's the section in the novel where Curly's wife it's her first appearance in the novel. We've had Candy talk to George and Lenny about her, but this is the first time we actually see her, and it's an extract I'm sure you will have looked at in class in depth and be quite familiar with by this point. So let's just have a look at the questions then. So the 2 parts. So we've got the one about the passage is, what methods does Steinbeck use to present Curly's wife and the attitudes of others to her? And that's quite interesting. A number of students did actually kind of miss out this second part, the attitudes of others to her, and that really denied them a number of marks. They just sort of focused on the presentation of Curly's wife, and therefore did deny themselves some marks through just not reading the question. The second part is, how does Steinbeck present attitudes to women in the society in which the novel is set? Quite interesting. And again, a number of students just focused on Curly's wife without thinking about, say, references to the cat house, or even to Aunt Clara, other things they could have talked about. So we know that we're being expected, if we're trying to get an A-star, we're going to be expected to look at form, structure and language. But let's just unpick a couple of key words here. Methods and present, because these can sometimes just be stumbling blocks to focusing on what the question's really asking. So when we talk about methods, it's just meaning writers' techniques, and that's all the things we talked about, like dialogue and setting, character, plot, all the things that kind of incorporate the function of characters within a novel. Present just means, how do they portray them, depict them, how do they come across to us as readers? So I've split this up into a number of sort of sections here. So form, it's a novel. We have our protagonists, George and Lenny, and to introduce the conflict that we would expect in most pieces of fiction, we do need an antagonist. So this introduction of her is quite significant because she is immediately presented to us as someone who is going to cause conflict. The fact that Lenny's eyes, he can't keep his eyes off her. we immediately know she's going to cause trouble, and therefore it creates a degree of interest. So I would expect students to sort of be focusing on elements to do with the fact that this is a novel. In terms of structure, at the top end, what would I be expecting to see? Well, I'd definitely expect students to explore the fact that she's described well before she speaks, and that therefore a good deal of bias is kind of created through that. We're getting a physical presentation of her, which really is sort of Steinbeck's way, isn't it, of prioritising our impression to be one of physical attributes rather than her personality. I would potentially expect students to also mention that Candy has previously called her a tramp and a tart, and therefore Steinbeck has really built a degree of bias. In terms of language, things I'd be looking for, well, I'd certainly be hoping that students would focus on some of the language that's been used to describe her. The fact that, she's got full rouged lips, and wide-spaced eyes, that she's heavily made up, focusing, on that level of appearance. At A-star level, I would expect students to be able to talk about symbolism. We know that she's got these rouged lips and that her fingernails are red and that she wears red mules and there's red ostrich feathers. And I would expect the best students to be talking about, multiple meanings here and multiple interpretations. Blood foreshadowing her death and possibly Lenny's, her sexuality, and also danger, red being sort of symbolic of danger or threat. I would expect students also to possibly focus on the contrasting imagery of red ostrich feathers in a bunkhouse. That it's a very unusual combination of images, one of glamour and sort of beauty in a bunkhouse that we've seen within the same chapter described in very bleak terms. I would hope that a number of you would think about the way that her physical behaviour is depicted and presented to us, and that we've got a number of verbs such as thrown, twisted, bridled, leaned, just to reinforce the physical behaviour that she is. She's very aware of her body and very sort of sexual in her movements. We might think about the fact that Steinbeck's included adverbs such as playfully revealing her flirtatious nature, and also the suggestive dialogue, nobody can't blame a person for looking. Sadly my slide has been clipped off at the bottom, but I would have added here that I would expect students to really sort of think about dialogue from other characters, things like George's, "Jesus, what a tramp, that's what Curly picks for a wife," and sort of thinking about the attitudes of others towards her. It's incredibly negative and quite abusive, quite aggressive. Tramp, that, it sort of really dehumanises her, takes away her identity, and also this sort of reinforcement that men choose their wife, that it's not an equal sort of relationship in any way. Or, also looking at others' attitudes towards her, slim, high, good looking. Again, the men really view her in terms of appearance. So just a couple of examples of A-star responses. So we've got here, Steinbeck uses the description of the appearance of Curly's wife to present aspects of her character. So what I like about this is that this student is really thinking about purpose. The full rouged lips and heavily made up eyes contrasts to her description as a girl, which implies her youth. In this way, Steinbeck suggests that this makeup acts as a mask or disguise in which Curly's wife is trapped behind. So I like this. You've got interpretation here, and once more, it's kind of focusing on Steinbeck's purpose. This idea is emphasised. So we've got developed points through the little rolled clusters of her hair, which present the image of a wig, again implying a disguise. So as soon as I see words like implying, I can see that this student is really kind of focusing on analysing. However, alternative interpretation. Steinbeck heavily emphasises on Curly's wife's appearance without reference to her character may present the way she was viewed by other men, as her appearance is described first, structure. This may suggest, analysis, that others judged her whole self solely as her appearance and regarded her appearance as her most important feature. This idea is developed through Curly's wife's sexuality, which is evident through her obvious flirting as she moves, so that her body was thrown forward and spoke playfully. Through Curly's wife's actions, Steinbeck suggests that her sexuality is the only form of power she has and the only way she knows to gain attention, explaining why she flirts so much. So you've got strong analysis, strong interpretation, and a number of explanations of the writer's purpose. Just the student sort of finishing off this response. Through her appearance, Steinbeck also describes the nasal, brittle quality of Curly's wife's voice. The word brittle. This student does an amazing job with embedded quotations. The word brittle implies something which appears hard, yet is physically weak, just as Curly's wife appears coarse, yet is actually vulnerable. This is a lovely, what I would certainly give credit as being an original interpretation. They've read between the lines and really made a lovely connection and link there. Steinbeck additionally uses her reaction as suddenly apprehensive at the mention of Curly to imply that Curly's wife is vulnerable. Okay. I'll just allow you, if you wish here, to pause the video and have a look at this extract that's on the screen. See if you can identify A-star features in this response. And once more, have a look at this student's response to the question. And have a look and see if you can identify A-star features within this yourself. Okay, one of the things that I've mentioned throughout this tutorial is the focus on original interpretations. What do I mean? I mean your take. So I've just included here a few of what I consider to be A-star phrases that you could use within your exam, just to show that you're being interpretive. Focus particularly on ones that showed a degree of objectivity, so possibly these 3, 4, 5, 6. Particularly these ones are what I would expect to see from C-grade candidates. It's not to say you can't use them, but they are a bit more personal rather than analytical. And the last thing I wanted to share with you is this slide, which I have up on my classroom wall, and it's just language of analysis, evaluation and interpretation, or certainly alternative interpretation. I would advise you to use a wide range of these words and phrases in your examination, because they're just signpost to an examiner that you're being analytical and evaluative and really interpretive. And if you can nail those particular skills, then you're going to be well on your way towards an A-star. Best of luck.